Welcome to Leadership Reimagined, where game-changing conversations are reshaping the world of work. I'm Janice Ellig, the CEO and founder of Ellig Group, Executive Search Advisors, where we are reimagining search through our longstanding commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. On today's topic, the philanthropic executive, making good while doing good, I am delighted to welcome Truett Tate, advisor, founder, CEO, board chairman, avid philanthropist, and champion of DEI. Having more than 40 years of senior executive and corporate board experience and having lived 40 of the past 50 years overseas in more than half a dozen locations, including Brazil, Hong Kong, and the UK, he has a unique global perspective that is deeply influenced by cultural understanding and personal connections. Previously, Truett served as CEO of ANZ's OECD countries, where he drove significant revenue growth and increased efficiencies. Prior to ANZ, Truett was group executive at Lloyd's Banking Group, responsible for wholesale and international banking worldwide, and was named Corporate Social Responsibility Executive. He also spent 27 years at Citigroup in a variety of senior roles, including responsibility for the corporate banking business across each of their regional geographies. Truett has served on a variety of corporate and not-for-profit boards and councils. He has just recently termed out as chairman of QBE North America and is currently chairman of Reference Point, TLC Lions, Creative PLC, Thinkably, and I am honored he is chair of Ellig Group's advisory board. He also serves on multiple associations and academic boards. With an enterprising, forward-thinking, philanthropic, and inclusive spirit, I am humbled to introduce today's guest, Truett Tate. Truett, I'm so delighted you can join us today.
Janice, thank you. I'm humbled by the introduction. And in light of the past folks that you've had on this program, I feel that I'm in an awfully good class of folks, and I will do my best to stand up to the standard.
Well, Truett, I really wanted to start off 2023 about the subject of philanthropy and giving back. And that meant really having a conversation with you because you really have been such a recognized and global executive who's giving back to society more than you received, putting back into this earth and planet more than you took out. And you've done this all your life. So what drives this philanthropic spirit and your voice for good while making good?
Thank you for the question. As you'd imagine, I need to find a way to condense it because you're asking where it came from and it's a journey. And so I think I need to give you a little bit of context. I'll try to make sure this doesn't run on too long, but the heart of it goes back to youth, being born in the Midwest, to a family where my father, coming out of the military, out of the war, while had a legal degree, he was an Amana salesman. My mom was a teacher. We lived a pretty simple life, a full one, a happy one, but a pretty simple life. And you do a jump to when my parents were divorced and I'm in Arizona. It got even simpler. We lived in one of those right out of the movies, U-shaped 2-story motel apartments. And again, and not wanting, but I wasn't 22 before I ever had a bedroom on my own. So again, kind of a very much classic Midwest family. Guess what? With that background, my dream, not to be a scientist, not to be a lawyer, a doctor, but to see the world. And the next chunk of life prepared me for a pivotal time between 2000 and 2010. That was the adventure with Citibank, living around the world, as you noted there. But kind of the subtext to think about is Mexico, Brazil, Hong Kong. I was confronted with the favelas of Rio, the Kowloon walled city in China, the Tanka, the boat people of Hong Kong, and then to, quote unquote, graduate to an OECD country and city like London, only to find that in the East End, there were neighborhoods as poor as anything that I had seen in those emerging market countries. All of that was a journey of awareness. I contributed. I cared about giving back, but I needed something that was more pivotal, that was more of an epiphany. For me, that was London and being exposed, quite honestly, to the man then known as Prince Charles. I am an avid champion, fan of Charles and what he did. 40, 50 years of being committed to increasing the world's awareness about climate change and the threats that come from the climate change, being a champion of the displaced, the disenfranchised, poor, youth, investing in a new generation of leaders and champions. He created, coming right out of the Navy, he gave his entire severance to charities and began what was called the Prince's Trust, which has nearly 50 years of contributions to society. Out of that, he created in roughly 1982, Business in the Community. Now I've done a background to say this was pivotal to me. I joined the board of Business in the Community. I ended up being the chair of corporate volunteering, ended up creating Give and Gain Day, ended up serving on several of the trust's boards, like In Kind Direct. And the realization, the dawning for me, is that I could, through my role as a corporate executive, impact those areas way out of proportion to what I as an individual might do out of personal wealth.
So here you are, a middle-class upbringing, Midwest values. You go to big bank, Citibank, right? And the influences that you had along the way globally, right? And then the work that you did have made you today, this accomplished global executive, but now giving back. So tell us about, you started to say, what are some of the charities you specifically support and why do you support these?
I could kind of divide them into two categories. One, most directly myself, would be something like People Loving People, which is very, very local. It's a food pantry, really created in the heart of the pandemic. And because of a shift in terms of my own time, literally, I was able to work there 2 or 3 times a week. I was able to manage traffic. There was this wonderful, humbling aspect that for all of my chairman positions, at the end of the day, I was greeting people daily, minute by minute, praying with them in the car and helping stack their trunks with food. But much of what I do is driven by supporting my wife, who's extraordinary. We were both, again, going back to that 2010, Holy Trinity Brompton introduced us to IJM, International Justice Mission, and the plight of the world in terms of slavery, in terms of trafficking, human trafficking. So my wife is on the board of Restore. My wife is on the board of Freedom from Fistula. And these are important to us as a couple. And for me, it is supporting her so that she can do the leading in those areas. I also would comment that one of the things that we're talking about here is the fact that corporations and corporate leaders are increasingly caring that the companies that they lead have a soul, have character, have a sense of values and a commitment to giving back. So, for instance, I chair Reference Point. Scott Gaydon is the CEO there.
What's their mission?
It's a management consulting firm, specializes in the financial services sector. Terrific firm, very successful, very good. Scott commits a huge amount of time and energy for Africa New Day, looking at the incredible humanitarian crisis there in the Congo. And it's not a matter of just sending money overseas. He goes, he puts himself at risk. He spends considerable time there. That's part of the leading from the front, demonstrating to the staff that you care. And in that sense, inspiring others.
Yeah. And TLC Lions is a very interesting one I've become involved with in London. Tell us a little bit about TLC Lions.
So much of what we do is inspiring others or enabling others. This is a firm, TLC Lions, which is all about corporate culture and all about seeing that the culture that is there on a mouse pad becomes real, tangible, that people believe in it. And I do believe the next generation wants to work for companies that believe in something, that really do have a soul, as I said before. TLC works with leadership to tell their stories in a way that bring the values and behaviors alive in the company, that make it credible. We talk about being authentic. Well, part of being authentic is to be able to tell your story, warts and all, demonstrate your vulnerability and demonstrate that you're human, that you care. And you get into such things as, I'm a big fan of Alexis Thompson's The Graceful Leader, the compassionate leader. This is a transition. This is a change from the kind of hard capitalist leader that we all adored 20 and 30 years ago.
Well, I'm particularly going through the pandemic now. I know in doing executive searches, my candidates want to go to purpose-driven organizations. And one that I'm working with right now, the CEO of this regional bank, is somebody who believes you should tell your story. And that's what TLC Lions does, doesn't it? So it makes everybody a little bit vulnerable, but you also know each other better. And that's what TLC Lions is all about in terms of building cultures, correct?
Absolutely. And you'll see too, for instance, TLC Lions has just completed a process of identifying the kindest, which means the most human leaders in the UK. And there's a dinner on February 9th. But the proceeds from that dinner will all go back into charity, specifically a missing people's charity that, again, has been motivated by the loss of his own father to be supportive of. And you get to a neat wrinkle there, Janice. I'm a big fan that corporations, I think, should invest a lot in matching funds versus necessarily big bulk contributions. Because what matching funds do is the company says, what matters to you matters to us.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right. And these awardees in the UK, there are how many of them? And the award is Leading with Heart, or?
Yeah, it's the Being Human Awards. I could be wrong on my number here, roughly 20 in terms of the various categories, and coming from leading companies across the UK. And I think it's great that you have a campaign like that celebrates not bottom line P&L, but instead the nominations are made by the staff saying that this is a leader who cares. And I actually had a meeting this morning at Reference Point where the head of HR was talking about the fact that she's loyal to the company because she's loyal to a leader who demonstrates care for her and what happens to her.
So you've spoken so much about this good leadership, and you're talking about good leadership in terms of matching funds for employees. When you're looking at those qualities and you've hired people into the organizations, and then you choose to work with some leaders in the not-for-profit or in government, what do you see as those characteristics that are most important, particularly today, in terms of where they can effectuate change? So what do leaders need to project to attract the best talent, to lead their companies or lead the not-for-profit, and to effectuate change on this planet?
Yeah, that's again,
it's a big question, Truett.
And we'll try not to boil the ocean.
Yeah, don't boil the ocean.
I think I would these aren't probably great surprises, but maybe in the sense of they're the ones that come first to my mind. They differ a bit from historical summaries. I actually think that the ability to listen is more associated to leading than many people often go to first. Obviously, there's having a vision, being a good communicator, but those things actually are best when both the vision and the communication of that vision come from a place of understanding what the people want and need, what the client wants and need, but what the staff wants and need. And, we get into an area here where there is training that can make someone ready to be a board member. A misgiving that you and I have actually talked about before. I don't think the requirement that someone have board experience to be a great board director, I believe that's been emphasized wrongly. There are characteristics in terms of how people listen, how they inspire, that they be disciplined, that they be self-starters. The mechanics of it, I think, can be taught. And indeed, I'm in awe of what Ellig has created in terms of a board preparation program. I know you didn't ask me here so that I could promote for you, but the fact is that this is not a 1 day or a 2 day event. There needs to be an investment not only in the knowledge that someone has, but they need to understand how to present themselves, how to understand their own strengths, how to identify a fit between who they are and what they stand for and what a company stands for. And it's complex, but it's something that you can invest in an individual and dramatically increase their readiness and their value to a company in a board position.
Well, and we've worked together where you've taken 2 women on the QBE board, right, which did not have board experience and have been phenomenal, right?
Phenomenal. Absolutely.
You also, championed them, you coached them, but you looked for certain characteristics that you felt would be right on the board. And so as a leader, I guess what I'm asking is, does every leader need to open that aperture when it comes to board appointments in terms of what's needed on that board?
And yes, you're 100% right. When you and I first talked about expanding and ultimately transforming the QBE board, one of the first things I said is let's look for folks who don't necessarily have board experience. And you brought a few gems to me. But in the process, we discussed the fact that I think many CEOs, many leaders of the company need to invest in 2 ways to increase the pool. One, I think they need to allow up and coming candidates to have board experiences. It's an investment into the system, but it's also an investment into society. And it's a little like allyship and sponsorship. We need more bold people who don't wait to be asked to be a mentor, but identify folks who have the potential and reach out and put their own credibility behind championing advancement by those people.
So now I'm going to switch a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Truett Tate, you're such an advocate of DEI. And stories range from hiring a chief credit officer from the Congo to transforming that QBE board from all male to female upon your departure. Really, you skewed the numbers to women.
Yeah, right.
How do you make those decisions to really sponsor and curate and mentor and promote these individuals to be achievers?
Okay, well, I'm going to be rude and deflect just a second to say there's a dramatic part of my story that you don't know, but kind of explains why that passion probably started back before my understanding of the need to give back. And that is, my mother, I mentioned before, she was a teacher. She's probably been the greatest inspiration of my life. She was a teacher. She ended up getting a doctorate. She became a principal. She became a superintendent of schools. And then my mom and dad divorced. We went to Arizona. A fairly misogynist school system would not hire her in any position other than a guidance counselor. Understand, this is a woman who had achieved a very senior level, had become a doctor, right? And guidance counselor. What I watched is with no acrimony, no malice, Mom ultimately replaced that principal who wouldn't let her use the doctorate on the plate on her table nor on her door. She became the principal, and she ultimately became the superintendent of schools there in Arizona as well. But she did it not with kind of an A profile. She did it with a beautiful heart. She was a very bright woman who was able to be gentle and compassionate. I watched, and against the odds, sit there and get knocked down in the middle of her life and build it back. No rancor, just love.
That is wonderful. So that's really why you take people under your wing, right? Somebody from the Congo in the UK is maybe language barriers, women who are not necessarily already prepared, totally prepared. You've taken them up and you've really mentored and sponsored them. You go beyond the mentoring. You really sponsor them. It goes back to those.
Inspired by that, not out of pity, but out of this, I know it can be done. I've seen the success that can be there just by the encouragement and the support and the inspiration. I love it becoming institutionalized by something like Ellig is doing with the board readiness program.
Yeah. I think it's beyond opening the aperture. I think you really look to see what is somebody's secret sauce? What is their special gifts that they have? And everybody has special gifts, and you really have, maximize those for people and given them great potential. Now I want to shift, Truett, to you and your wonderful wife, Dorothy, share some very similar passions, from swimming as polar bears in freezing waters, and I've seen the pictures, to body surfing in the Dominican Republic, to being there at food banks, really directing traffic. I've been on the phone when you do that, when most needed, to being in the company of King Charles most recently. So tell us a little bit more about these adventures.
Okay, now we are getting into, well, I can't say boil the ocean in light of the fact that we love to swim in freezing oceans. But,
it's supposed to be healthy, but I'm not doing it.
I guess there's maybe a generalization that gets at that for you is I'm at a stage in my life where I love being with my family and with my friends. I'm, in that sense, a very social animal and a very family-driven animal. So the fact that my wife and I try to go swimming together in the cold every day is part of a ritual. I mean, and I do love rituals. We wake up every morning and we do a devotion together, 10 minutes. We do one just before we go to bed. We've got a group of about 20 friends who every few years go together to places like Morocco. We were just down in the Dominican Republic for Christmas, and we had 30 people over to our place for New Year's. And within that, and everybody talked about that, within that New Year's Eve, we're nuts on going around the room and having every child, there were 7-year-olds and there were 20-year-olds, to stand up and talk about what's important in life to them. I love this concept of focusing more on our children, teaching them how to have a voice, which means as a parent, make sure you ask for their view. You give them opportunities to articulate their thoughts, and you encourage them for doing so. And everyone ends up being inspired. That investment in terms of the leader that listens and the leader that communicates well starts when they're 5 and 3 and 10. They're taught by learning how to hold hands at a meal and say a prayer together. And it's not a repeated one that everyone says together, but encouraging the child to think hard about what they're thankful for. So in many ways, it goes back to the beginning of our conversation. It was a journey for me, but one that there's a lot of investment starting when you're young to get to that point.
It seems to me you're saying that to be a leader in any capacity, one has to give back, right? To build, make good, but do good to their employees, to their consumers, to their communities, to their investors. You have to balance that. Seems like you found the time because it was really important to you to do this and impact other people's lives. Do you think since the pandemic, it's going to change the way leaders lead going forward?
That's a really interesting question. The temptation is quickly to kind of go for a simple yes. I think the jury's out to a certain degree. I think that the pandemic was a very important break. We were not going to change as radically as I believe we're going to, were it not for the pandemic, because the inertia, the momentum of doing things the way we've always done them. You see that companies are wrestling with the back to office debate. And I don't think there's one answer, and I don't think that there's an answer we can see clearly now. But what is happening is that CEOs, leaders of companies, are understanding that the only way we thought people could build community and culture isn't necessarily the case anymore. Technology, the way relationships are formed by the X generation, the Z generation, they've changed. And it gets back to my statement. The CEOs need to listen to that, and we're going to need to pace an evolution towards a new way to work. And it is going to be a way that has more soul, more caring. And we could do a whole nother talk on this is going to translate, in my mind, into something that's critical, which is just capitalism. I'm a huge capitalism fan, but the fact is the way it's been implemented in the last couple of decades did not give the right distribution of success and wealth. And it has created divisions, which we're only going to heal by adjusting that vision of just capitalism.
Oh, I love that's a whole other.
It is, I know.
A whole other conversation. So, any parting words to our audience about doing good, making good, giving back? What can they do to impact the planet and people?
I guess I'll just go with a couple of initial thoughts when you say that. First of all, a call for everyone to be open in the sense of open to hear, open to appreciate, open to learn. A little bit of a nut on the fact that you've got to be open to the miracles that are out there. You have to be open to see all the good, to see all the opportunity. You talked about encouraging people. The encouragement has to start with you have to see the potential in the individual. And I'd say the second thing is invest. See everything as an investment, but invest in the youth. As someone who is an older generation, the answer is we're not going to solve them. But the next generations can if they have the right tools and the right encouragement.
Truett Tate, thank you so much for sharing your story as the philanthropic executive making good while doing good. You've really inspired us, and you've also made, I think, everybody think about how can we, beginning in 2023, be better at what we do and how we impact others, to really reach out to others to make their lives better. Because so many of us are so fortunate. The only way the world is going to get closer and better is to make it better by us taking ownership. And you take ownership, Truett. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
And thank you. It has been a treat.
And to our audience, thank you for tuning in to another game-changing conversation on Leadership Reimagined. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, or visit our website at elliggroup.com. Thank you all for joining us, and may everybody have a very happy, prosperous, and thoughtful 2023.